Hello and welcome back to Story Time with Sarah. So we're in the middle of reading The Christmasaurus by Fletcher. Today I'm going to read chapter 3 and chapter 4. To have a little recap from yesterday, we read about the elves in the North Pole and how they found the frozen egg. And they were on their way to show Santa. So we'll see what Santa has got to say. Chapter 3, Santa's Bottom. Have you ever seen a house that's bigger than a school? Santa's house is. Have you ever seen a house that's bigger than a castle? Santa's house is. Have you ever seen a house that's bigger than the moon? Okay. Santa's house isn't quite that big, but it is pretty massive. In your head, imagine the biggest, grandest house you've ever seen. Now, imagine it's all made of strong, sturdy wood, like a giant log cabin. Now, add a huge twisty turret. 4 tall chimney pots puffing out clouds of glittery smoke. And 99 windows of brightly coloured glass. And 1 frosted one for Santa's bathroom. Now, imagine an enormous front door made of thick, chunky pine, with a gleaming door knocker shaped like a snowflake made of solid, unbreakable ice. Leading to the door, there used to be a knobbly cobblestone path. But it was so hard for the elves to walk on that Santa had it replaced with a toboggan run. Now the elves zoomed down to the front door on miniature sledges. On either side of the toboggan run, imagine a sprawling garden, jam-packed full of snow-covered Christmas trees. This is the North Pole Snow Ranch. It's where Santa lives, right at the centre of the North Pole. Snozzletrump and the others lived very close by. At the top of the toboggan run path was the elf city, which was about the size of a small human village. There were large stables for the reindeer, with triple height ceilings so they could fly inside. A Christmas-themed miniature golf course. A cinema showing all the greatest Christmas films. A library full of Christmas stories. 4 North Starbucks coffee shops. An ice skating rink, which was really just Santa's permanently frozen outdoor swimming pool. Because elves love food so much, especially sweet things, every other shop was either a sweet shop or a bakery. Yum, yum, yum. So the air always smelt of warm sugar and fresh crumpets. And there was so much more. Here's a little map so you can see. It was a fantastic place to live. Suddenly, Snozzletrump, Specklehump, Sparklefoot, Sprout burst through the enormous wooden front doors of the Snow Ranch. They waddled into the entrance hall, hunched together under the weight of the frozen egg on their backs. Santa, come quick! Santa, come help! The egg is heavy for North Pole elves, the 8 elves cried out. All of a sudden, the boom, boom of heavy boot steps rattled around the entrance hall, where the 8 egg finders waited. Then the footsteps stopped, and there was a silence for a moment. Out of nowhere, a huge, heavy man crashed down from the ceiling on a circus trapeze. It was Santa. He always liked to make an entrance. He was the largest man you could ever imagine. Now, imagine your 2 fattest relatives. It's okay. They won't know you thought of them. Now, imagine that those 2 people were one person. Yep, that's how big Santa was. Not just fat, but fat-tastic. He was easily the size of 50 elves put together. But for a man of such enormous proportions, Santa was surprisingly nimble. He was the fastest runner in the northern hemisphere. He could dance on the tips of his toes like a ballerina. He could backflip and somersault like a giant, stealthily ninja. He once tightrope walked from the North Pole to the South Pole and halfway back again. He had to get a lift home on the sleigh because of a nasty blister. Santa triple backflipped into a double forward roll across the vast entrance hall and came to an abrupt stop millimetres away from the group of elves. His deep red onesie stretched tightly over his round belly. He hopped, skipped and tippy-toed around them, peering excitedly at what they were carrying on their backs, still hidden under their woolly elf coats.
Ho, 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 how exciting! Santa said giddily. How jolly marvellous! Spiffing, oh, what a wonderful sight! Oh, what a wonder! How puzzlingly mysterious! How mysteriously puzzling! You 8 little elfie welfies, what have you here? Can I touch it? Shall we look? Why, I know what it is. Of course, it's obvious. This is what is it?
With that, the elves pulled off their coats and scarves and revealed the shimmery shell of the enormous egg.
Santa said curiously.
The elves repeated.
Interesting,
Santa whispered through his thick, white, whiskery and twisty moustache. Very interesting, the elves replied, hoping Santa would next say something that rhymed.
And where was it nesting?
Santa asked, looking rather impressed with himself at managing to find a rhyme. He was usually absolutely rotten at rhyming with elves, which they found extremely frustrating. In the ice, it was frozen. It's lucky that it wasn't broken, cried out Sprite.
Crikey,
Santa said, looking rather concerned all of a sudden.
If this egg has been frozen down in the ice mines, then it must be very old. Even older than me, and I'm 650, 20, oh golly gosh. I seem to have forgotten how old I am.
The elves all looked at each other, half excited by the riddle of the old frozen egg, and half concerned that Santa had now started talking with absolutely no concern for rhythm or rhyme. What do we do with an egg that's frozen? asked Sparklefoot. Boil it up or crack it open, asked Spudcheeks. Just then the egg gave another little wibbly wobble.
Boil it up, crack it open, Santa cried. You balmy bunch of tiny twips. Can't do that. There's something inside this egg. Something alive. This egg needs to be warmed slowly, cared for, loved. This egg needs its mother to sit on it like a mother sits on her eggs.
He looked around the room, as if hoping to see some sort of giant hen that could sit on the egg to warm it up. But, Santa, this egg has no mum. It needs someone else's bum, said Snozzletrump, who tried to use words like bum or bottom as much as possible.
Golly jingle bells, you're right, Snozzletrump, said Santa. But whose bottom is big enough to warm up this frozen egg?
And with that, the elves broke into a song that went something like this. This egg needs warming up under someone's bum, but an elf's backside is a tiny one. If every elf put its bottom on the egg would freeze their bums instead. So an elf can't do it, that's a silly idea. An elf can't do it, it would take a whole year. If an elf can't do it, there must be someone else, someone much bigger than a North Pole elf. And the elves finished their song and danced on their knees, pointing their fingers at Santa, looking up at him with hopeful eyes.
Me? Santa said. I can't sit on that egg. It's almost Christmas time. There's so much planning to be done, and packing and wrapping.
Santa hesitated, but deep down he knew what needed to be done, and he knew that he was the only person to do it. His elves would take care of all the Christmas preparations. All he needed to do was park his giant, jolly, warm bottom on top of that frozen egg. So that's exactly what he did. Chapter 4, Inside the Egg. Santa sat on the egg day and night. It was very uncomfortable, as I'm sure you can imagine, but the elves made him breakfast, brunch, elevenses, lunch, tea, dinner and supper every day, and delivered it to him on a tray with a song. They even wheeled his television into the makeshift egg warming room, the airing cupboard, so that Santa could watch his favourite Christmas films, which were mostly about him, whilst the egg defrosted beneath his enormous backside. Occasionally, the egg would wobble a little, and the longer Santa perched on top of it, the more and more it wobbled. Santa knew this was a good sign that his warm bottom was doing the trick. But the time was not on the egg side. Each day that passed brought Christmas a day closer.
Come on, egg wobbler. Whatever you are, if you don't get a shift on and hatch by Christmas Eve, then I'll have no choice but to fly off and leave you. I'd hate to give up on you, but the children need me. It's my duty, you see, Santa whispered worriedly as the clock struck midnight, signalling the end of another no-show day from whatever was inside the egg. At that moment, Santa had an idea. Maybe the egg would hatch faster if the airing cupboard was even warmer. Snozzletrump, whack up the central heating to full blast at once,
Santa ordered. After a few hours, the ranch felt like a sauna. Sprout even cut the legs off his trousers and turned them into shorts. It wasn't long before all the elves thought that was a pretty nifty idea and followed suit, and for the first time in history, the North Pole gift shop in the elf city started selling sweater vests instead of sweaters, and snap-back caps instead of thick woolly elf hats. It was the hottest Santa's ranch had ever been. Santa stripped right down to his stripy red and white undervest and his best Christmas underpants. The red ones with white snowflakes on them that play jingle bells when you pull them up. He was so hot and sticky, but he didn't mind. He would do whatever it took to get that thing inside of the egg out safely. All this time, Santa and the elves had been trying to guess what was wobbling inside the egg. Some elves guessed it was a bunch of big bunnies. Others thought it would be a large polar bear. There were lots of stupid, nonsensical elf guesses, and none of them got it right. But, of course, they hadn't read the start of this story as you have. I'm sure you've guessed by now that this egg was the exact same special egg I told you about at the beginning. So, unlike Santa and the elves, you know exactly what was inside it. Soon, there was only one chocolate left in Santa's advent calendar, and that meant it was Christmas Eve.
Come on, Eggy, there's not much time,
sighed Santa, patting the smooth shell under his bottom. All the North Pole elves and their families had crowded into the egg warming room to show their support. Some had brought candles, others had brought little electric heaters from their homes. They all sat together around the egg and sang Christmas carols all day long, trying to encourage the egg wobbler to wobble its way out. After a little while, Snozzletrump inspected the egg, running his hands over every inch of its shell. When he had finished, he turned to face the waiting crowd with a sorrowful expression on his sweaty face. The egg that sits behind my back has not one single hatching crack. Santa let out a long sigh. He knew the time had come for him to step down from the egg and get ready for... Crack! A great noise echoed around the room. All the elves jumped to their feet.
Shush, everyone,
hissed Santa from on top of the egg. He put his hand down and felt the smooth shell. He ran his hand along the shiny surface, which was no longer cold and frozen, but actually quite warm. Suddenly, he stopped moving his hand. He'd felt something. He moved his fingers back a few millimeters, and there it was. A very thin, but very definite crack in the eggshell.
It's hatching time,
Santa bellowed. A hushed excitement spread like magic through the room as Santa carefully climbed down from the egg and stood with all his elves watching. Then, out of nowhere, a very deep rumble could be heard. It was a most peculiar sound, almost like the rumble of a distant train, or like a very loud, very hungry tummy. The rumble was coming from inside the egg. Santa looked at the 8 elves who had found the egg, who were all looking excitedly nervous. Or maybe they were nervously excited. It was hard to tell. The rumble grew louder. The egg started to wobble. Suddenly, that tiny crack broke open a little more. Now there was a big, deep, dark crack, which you could almost see into. All the elves held hands very tightly. Snozzletrump let out a nervous snozzle trump. Then, just as suddenly, as it had all started, everything seemed to stop. The rumble stopped. The wobbling stopped. There were no more cracks appearing, just silence. Everyone in the room was still except for Santa. He took one brave step and peered into the shell. He couldn't see much. It was all very dark, but it looked like there was something shiny inside. As Santa leant in for a closer look, that shiny something blinked.
It's an eye!
Gasped Santa, and the eye was looking out at everyone in the room. Santa almost jumped out of his skin, which made all the elves almost jump out of their skins. Once they'd all got back in their skins, everyone laughed nervously at themselves for being such scaredy cats. That's when it happened. Crack-a-boom! Santa and the elves dived for cover as the egg exploded into a billion sparkly pieces, showering the room in shimmering shell that fell like glitter dust over their heads. Slowly, Santa got to his feet and sneezed off some of the shell dust from his mustaching beard. Achoo! He brushed glitter from his underpants and wiped his full moon spectacles, and when he put them back on his nose, he couldn't quite believe what his eyes saw. In the middle of the room, where the egg stood moments ago, was something impossible. But this was the North Pole, where anything is possible. "What is it?" cried the elves. Then they heard a roar.
Well, bless my Kringles,
Santa said with a tear in his eye.
It's a baby dinosaur.
Well, thank you for watching, and we'll see what happens tomorrow in Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. Goodbye.